Done. Perfect. Thanks, Beth. Well, good morning, everybody. I'm sorry I'm a few minutes late. I actually was here. I just couldn't get in, and I never know whether that's and who's in that is. So anyway, I'd like to welcome you all. If we'd like to just take a couple of minutes to quickly go around and introduce yourself and just say which league you're with. We'll start with Christina. And you're on mute.
I've had computer problems for the last couple of days, so I'm a little questionable. I'm Christina Manthe. I'm the president of the Jeffco League.
And I'm Fair Russick. I'm in the Jeffco League, and I'm on the local government committee, and that my interest is in metro districts.
Barb?
Barb Winery. Right now I'm co-director for voter services on the state board. I'm also voter service coordinator for the Gurley Weld League.
Rich.
Hey, I'm Rich Lins. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Give me a thumbs up. I hear it. I see a nod. Thank you. So I'm the stamp guy. I'm the guy who's been spearheading for the last 6 years to get our Colorado election ballot sent with a paid postage return envelope. And I have an update about that if there's ever any time in the next hour or so. We end our meeting in an hour. Is that correct?
Yes, we try to keep it to an hour. And if we have time, I will call on you to very briefly share.
Thank you.
So, Neil.
Hi, Neil McBurnett, and I have been working on election integrity since 2022 and helped with the election security position we did and brought risk limiting audits to Colorado and enjoy that stuff. And wow, I have things to tell about Georgia, but I guess they're not necessarily relevant today. But I also have things to say about the risk limiting audit from Colorado this year. So I don't know if you want to report on that, but if so.
Yeah, yes. No, keep me on it so that if I look like I'm getting ready to stray and adjourn, why you can say just a minute. And just so you know, I'm getting ready to send the election security position out to a young woman, I believe in Virginia. She's contacted us to get information about Colorado elections, and Jerry is helping with that. So Jerry, next, you're up.
Oh, you want me up now?
Yeah, introduce.
Sorry, my husband was just talking to me at the same time. Yes, I just sent you a few comments, mostly in agreement. I think there's one typo that I pointed out. So at your leisure, take a look at it. I'm glad to hear that other states are moving forward.
Yeah,
see how far they get.
Jeff. And you're on mute, Jeff.
Jeff Withers in the Denver League and lead of the local government LAC group. And that's enough, I guess.
And Tony.
Tony Larson, and I'm in the Denver League.
And Tony's been active at the state level for a long time. She tried to get away and we pulled her back. So. You can never leave. You can never leave.
I think I'm tethered.
I do too. Yeah.
And I suspected more by choice. So not such a bad thing. Well, I'm Karen Cheek. For those of you that I think probably all of you know that, I also am on the state board. I am local league support. I also am on the leadership team of my own Montezuma County local league. And I'm pleased to say we've seen some increases in membership, and I'm hoping we see some increases in participation, especially considering what's coming down the pike in this upcoming year, changes and some of those kinds of things. So at this point, I want to have Andrea introduce herself. I had called upon her to come and report about the Colorado Voting Rights Act. we've been notified that it looks like there's going to be some legislation supporting that in our state. And so I'm going to turn it over to you, Andrea. We appreciate your time today because we know you're busy.
Oh, well, thank you, Karen. And thank you all for having me. I'm Andrea Wilkins. I'm the legislative liaison with the State League. And as Karen mentioned, I'll be talking to you all about the Colorado Voting Rights Act. This is a bill that was introduced on the first day of session as Senate Bill 1. That indicates a high priority for the General Assembly, but of course, it's also a high priority for LWVCO and the many other stakeholders that we have been working in coalition with to develop this language. Various groups throughout Colorado, and then also the Harvard Election Law Clinic has provided a lot of technical assistance on this bill as well. The sponsors are Senator Julie Gonzalez, and then in the House, we have Jennifer Bacon and Judy Joseph. The bill was assigned to the Senate State Affairs Committee. It's not yet set for a hearing, but we are expecting that to take place sometime in mid-February. So, you know, not the first one out of the gate, but you know, we do think that it will be moving before too long here. So this bill and the concept for the bill is something that the League has been working on as, you know, a comprehensive effort for some time, and then there are pieces of it that we've been working on, you know, at various points throughout our history. So this is something that we're really excited to see developed and to see it introduced. The Legislative Action Committee is actually having its first meeting tomorrow. So we have not voted to take a formal position on this bill yet, though, because we are one of the key stakeholders and also a member of the steering committee for the coalition. We've been intimately involved in the development of this bill. So this is something that we're really excited about. Really kind of the impetus for this is to provide more state level protection. We want to ensure that the rights of voters are protected, you know, even beyond the Federal Voting Rights Act, and, you know, just really kind of out of, you know, sort of proactive, you know, efforts, or, you know, a concern that as we continue to see voting rights at the federal level attacked and dilution to the federal VRA. I think there's a lot of people, both within the General Assembly and in the broader stakeholder community, that really feel like more protections are needed at the state level as well. So while we do believe that we have a very good system in Colorado, there's definitely some areas where, as you know, the stakeholders came together, we felt like, you know, there could be some strengthening and there could be some added protections, particularly given the climate that we're in right now. So that's a little bit of background as to kind of how the group came together and why we're doing the work that we're doing on this. The stakeholder group has been really broad, and it's been meeting at least on a monthly basis for well over a year now. And LWVCO has been in on those conversations since the very beginning. There's also been a lot of consultation with the Colorado Attorney General's office, and of course, the Secretary of State regarding language and some of the provisions. And then one section of the bill that I'll turn to as I kind of start to describe the different components involves data collection that really can help ensure that the independent redistricting committees, let's see, they're not committees. Tony, I'm losing my word for the independent redistricting commissions.
The commissions.
Commissions, thank you. I was going to say, I know that's not right, but I couldn't get the word there. So the improved data collection that we'll see in the bill are really intended to kind of bolster their work, and that's actually a specific piece that LWVCO has been talking about for some time now. So this provision in the overall Colorado VRA is something that we're really excited about. And that's involved a lot of discussion with the state demographer's office. Those are discussions that, initially we had on an individual organization basis. And then this was one of the key components of the larger Voting Rights Act, the Colorado Voting Rights Act, that we really emphasized needed to be in this bill, because it's a problem that we were seeing for some time, and we knew there needed to be improvements in data collection around election-related information. I know there's a lot of interest in this bill in general, and it's a large bill. It's around 35, 40 pages. So there's a lot of different things going on. I know that there is going to be more discussion around this beyond what we talk about today. I believe the statewide dialogue tomorrow will focus on it. And I think there's some more league-wide information sessions planned as well. So I will do my best to give you a solid overview of what the bill is attempting to do, but please know there will be other opportunities to hear more about this legislation. The LAC will certainly be following it, and we are happy to provide any updates around the advocacy piece of things and the bill's passage. Well, hopefully passes its progress through the legislature as it works its way towards final passage, we hope. Okay, so with that, I want to start out by really kind of talking about the big key components of the bill. There's really 4 areas where we're seeing some change that's intended to improve voting access and provide additional protections. The first one is improved access for those individuals, those voters residing on tribal reservations. The second category of change that we're seeing here is that there are some requirements for additional notice and information around support that is available to individuals with disabilities. There's other sections that deal with improved language access at the municipal level for qualifying municipalities. And finally, there is the provision that I mentioned just a minute ago around improved election-related data collection. So the overarching goal of the bill, as I mentioned, kind of stemming from this idea that state level protections are something that, we've got control over. We really want to see some improvements there to protect against any dilution that may happen at the federal level. But more specifically, we are, this bill is focused on providing new legal tools to fight discriminatory voting rules and election practices. Here we're really kind of talking about the creation of a private cause of action and enforcement authority that would be exercised by the Colorado Attorney General. And really just kind of in an overarching sense, looking to, provide protections against discriminatory voting rules and any election practices that either have the intent of being discriminatory or the actual effect of discriminating against protected classes of voters. So in terms of the new legal tools, the private cause of action, what's happening there is there's an opportunity for both aggrieved individuals or organizations to file a civil suit alleging voter suppression, voter dilution, or unlawful voting prerequisites based on gender identity, gender expression, or sexual orientation. And I want to call that out specifically because there was a lot of work done with the Colorado AG's office about creating a standalone protection for LGBTQ voters. And that's kind of why you're seeing that specific language called out. This is to provide similar protections to what we see already offered to other protected classes, individuals that are, members of a specific racial group, classes of people that are protected against discrimination based on color or being a language minority. So there was work to create this additional protection for LGBTQ individuals that would sort of resemble some of the other protected classes that exist in current law. One thing I want to say in regard to, the cause of action, I mentioned that that's something that both an individual or an organization can pursue. That is a provision that, really can directly involve the league, voting rights organizations that, are really focused on a mission of supporting voters, improving voter access, all that sort of thing. If there are, practices in play that are having the effect or intended to discriminate against certain groups of people and, impact our mission as an organization and essentially makes our job harder, we would have standing to pursue a civil suit for allegations of suppression or discriminatory practice. And then, as I mentioned a minute ago, the AG would be responsible for, overall enforcement of the act. Let's see, and then I can get into a little bit more of the specifics around those 4 categories. First one, the dealing with registration on tribal reservations. Some of the additions that are occurring here to really increase access is that individuals that have an address that is not recognized by the U.S. Postal Service can register using the address of the tribal council headquarters or any other address approved by the Secretary of the Tribal Council. And there has to be at least one such address approved in each precinct on the reservation if it's requested by the tribal council. So there's kind of an increased ability to identify, an address that people living on tribal reservations can use if they are in a situation where their address isn't recognized by the Postal Service. The tribal council is also able to request the SPC on the reservation for election day and any number of days during the 15-day period leading up to the election. So we're seeing a couple of different things there that are really intended to improve the ability of tribal members both to register and to vote, and then to have access. So those are some of the things specific to voters on tribal reservations. One of the other 4 key categories that I mentioned was individuals with disabilities. There's some improved notice requirements or some new notice requirements that apply to entities that are engaged primarily in providing state-funded services or programs to individuals with disabilities. For entities that meet that criteria, they're required to publicly display voting-related information in each building that the entity occupies. So if it's a multi-building facility, they need to have multiple notices. And the notice includes things such as voter registration information, voting rights, voting-related accessibility accommodations that are available, and contact information for the Secretary of State's accessibility coordinator. The information that's provided to those that are being served by these entities also has to include identification of the nearest drop box and VSPC. The next category of change that I briefly touched on, and we can dive into just with a little more detail here, is expansions around language access, specifically the multilingual ballot expansion. It's been, I want to say, around 5 years. I think it was the 2020 session. Some of you may recall that the league was involved in the coalition effort to pass the multilingual ballot bill that was introduced. I think it was the 2020 session. And, really the goal there was to see, a requirement put into place that for counties that had enough of a population that spoke a common language other than English, and that population also spoke English less than very well, that those counties would need to provide a minority language sample ballot, and they would also have to provide an in-person minority language ballot to anyone that was requesting one. Specifically, the requirements there that would implicate the county, and this is part of current law, is that within the county boundary, there has to be at least 2,000 citizens of 18 or older, or 2.5% of the citizens in the county that speak English less than very well for this requirement to apply.
Angela,
Go ahead, Karen.
I just have a quick question. I think you just said for in-person ballots. Does that mean that let's say I'm in a minority in my community and would need a special ballot? I have to actually go and vote in person in order to be able to access that ballot. In other words, it's not going to be mailed out to me automatically. I have to. Okay.
Yeah. I believe that's the case. Christina, go ahead.
Yeah, Andrea, what's the usage on the alternative language ballots? How much has been requested? How many?
That's a great question. I am sure that information is available. I do not have it off the top of my head. So I can do a little bit of digging and find that out. I don't know if anyone else on the call happens to know, but I'm sure that those statistics are available, but unfortunately I don't know offhand, but I can find out.
Jerry's got her hand up.
Oh, Jerry, go ahead, jump in.
You're muted. Jerry, you're muted.
I'm sorry. How would a county clerk go about identifying those who need a minority language ballot?
The information, I think, is based on the reporting through the American Community Survey, I believe.
But suppose I spoke Korean. How does the clerk know I need a Korean language ballot?
Well, it would only come into play if the county had sufficient population that met those thresholds, and they would determine that by the information that's available for their county through the American Community Survey.
Okay.
So they would have a sense of whether or not they, as a county, met that threshold to even have to do this. And then if they do, and I want to say, I shouldn't guess because there's a handful of counties throughout Colorado that this applies to.
Yeah.
So, and I don't have that exact number with me, but again, I can look
I'm
that
just
up.
thinking of the city of Aurora, which is multicultural to say the least. And
right, yeah.
So,
well, and it's an important point that you bring up, Jerry, because it's really like the trigger for it all is whether or not the county, in current law, whether the county meets that threshold in terms of, its known population for, citizens over the age of 18 that are speaking English less than very well. And there's another common language that, that is like the native language for them. So that's kind of, the trigger for this requirement applying in the first place. But, when you talk about cities, that's the important point to keep in mind, where the expansion of this concept is playing out in the Colorado VRA, because in addition to counties, the Colorado VRA would require those same requirements to apply to municipalities that are meeting the same thresholds. So if a municipality is at that threshold of either 2,000 people or 2.5% of its 18 plus population that speak English less than very well, and then there is that other common language, then the requirement would apply to the municipality in the same way that it is applied to counties over the last few years. So that's one of the
Okay,
expansions.
I know I'm sort of wandering in the weeds, but I'm thinking of how do you implement these things?
So in terms of, what's currently happening is, there is the sample ballot that's available that voters can access. And I actually don't know if that is something they access online or, if they're going to the VSPC, then, that's something that, they could do there, assuming that, they're in a place that meets that threshold. But, the sample ballot is, one of the first requirements. So individuals speaking the minority language can kind of take a look at things and, study their ballot essentially. And then when it comes time to vote, they could go to the VSPC and request a ballot in their preferred language.
Okay.
So again, then, just to reiterate, there is a responsibility on the part of the voter to make known that they need a non-English ballot to complete. It's not going to be incumbent upon the county clerk to know that Karen Sheik needs a ballot in Korean.
Yeah, that's right. I believe that's the case. Really, the county's responsibility is to provide these translated ballots when they've met that threshold. But then, yes, the individual voter would need to actually go about accessing them if that's what if they wanted to use the minority language ballot to vote.
Then I think that would need to be part of our education piece.
I don't know if you can see this, but the Arapahoe County Clerk put out a postcard size information pamphlet.
Oh, nice.
It's just looks like 5 or 6 different languages, and they are asked to call the county clerk, where it says you will offer translation services in person and by phone. Call the number, visit our office.
Right.
So, and I have no idea what all of this says in different languages.
Hopefully the same thing.
But there's one that's Russian. I know this.
Well, it's good to ask our county clerks if they're doing that.
Yeah, I don't know. Can you see
I don't
it?
know. I know we do in Spanish up in Greeley, but I don't know what
They've
other
been trying
language.
to add one language each year. So
Okay.
it's an incremental thing.
Well, and once I finish the overview too, I can do a quick search to see if I can readily pull up the counties that are currently subject to this requirement. Like I said, I know it's a handful of counties in Colorado. I'm venturing a guess of maybe around 10, but I could be really off base on that. So please don't quote me on that. I'll see if I can round up that information. But again, that's part of current law. The expansion that the Colorado VRA would provide is the application of similar requirements and the same threshold to similarly situated municipalities. So
Thank you, Andrea.
that's the key change that we're talking about here.
Okay.
Hey, you have a question? You're on mute.
I do. You were saying that most of this information is gathered through a community survey, which I don't know how many people fill those out, but there's not a question on the registration as to if you if you need access or if you have English or not, or if you speak another language.
I
don't think
there
so.
is.
I don't think so.
It seems like an oversight, but
Yeah.
it'd be handy.
It would be. That's what I'm saying. How can you intake some of that information more?
Right, I don't, surveys are, you don't know who fills them out and,
I've never
that's the-
had one.
you
This is
know.
The
Well, the
American,
American Community Surveys conducted through the US Census Bureau. So,
Oh,
you know, it's
Okay.
it's kind of the best source of data we have. Now, I think if you got really into the weeds on it, you know, there's some people that say that, you know, margin of error isn't necessarily what we would want it to be, and you know, that kind of thing. But it's really sort of the go-to source for determining that. That's why it was incorporated into Colorado law when these thresholds were being determined.
Andrea, would it be too late in this legislation to do what Faye is suggesting, is to maybe add that to the online website when people register, or when people are checking to update their registration, someplace where they can check that off, that I need a non-English ballot. And then I don't know how difficult with technology, maybe Neil would know this, to flag that somehow at the Secretary of State's office, or so that information could be then disseminated to the local county clerks. To me, it seems like that might be a more effective way of keeping track of that than a survey that somebody may or may not get. I'm like Barb, I've never gotten any surveys.
yeah.
Well, I do think it would be a big challenge to accomplish that. Because, you know, checking whether or not you need a minority language ballot on your voter registration, if you don't live in a county that meets the threshold, you're not going to get one. So, you know, because right now the way Colorado law is written is that, you know, there's only specific counties that are going to fall under this requirement, and it ties back to, you know, the portion of your population that speaks a common language other than English, and English less than very well. So it makes sense to expand that to municipalities, so we're bringing more people into the fold, and, you know, maybe getting a little closer to what you're talking about there. But yeah, like I said, you know, existing Colorado law, this is an expansion of what's already in statute here. So that's a much easier thing than to say, you know, we're going to do this statewide. You know, that would be a huge.
To me, it just
you know,
seems like an easy question to put on voter registration. Do you speak a language? I not say, do you need a ballot, but do you speak a language other than English?
Yeah, no, you could. Well, I mean, sometimes I think changing the ballot format and what goes onto the ballot is a bigger deal than it sounds like it should be. And, you know, there's a lot of times where I think we do run into, you know, opposition from the clerks because funding is very tight, and, you know, putting additional changes in place can be really difficult. So it's one of those things that doesn't sound like it should be that hard, but when you get to actually going about it, there's a lot more hurdles there than it, you know, at first glance you would think. But again, just knowing that there's people out there that might want, you know, a minority language ballot, if they don't live in a county that is required to provide it, they don't. So there's no, like, you could ask what language they speak, but I guess I just kind of wonder to what end, because if they're not in an affected county, they're not going to get that ballot.
I think
Well, just for
suggesting it would be a
identification
more effective
purposes.
way to determine which county needs to be doing this.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think when they decided, when the original multilingual ballot bill was drafted, I think relying on the U.S. Census information was kind of deemed to be, you know, the best available source of information that would help determine. And that was just the decision they made to figure out how they were going to figure out which counties would fall under this requirement.
It was in federal law first, I think.
Right. Yes. It's a component of the Federal Voting Rights Act, and it was just kind of a piece that was essentially carried over into the Colorado multilingual ballot bill.
Gary.
I would caution about adding, or maybe rephrasing the question on the voter registration form. I've been working the naturalization ceremonies. Virtually 95% of all the candidates speak a second language, and they are also fluent in English. So that doesn't really get to the core of the problem, is what I'm trying to say. Plus, we have a few people on the league side registering voters who are fluent in other languages as well. So I would caution on how you phrase a question like that.
Neil, did you have a comment? You're on mute. You're on mute. You're on mute, Neil.
I'm sorry, I've been answering your email instead of paying attention. What's the question?
It looked like maybe you had a comment or something. I was just,
No, sorry.
Barb does so.
maybe this is where the league needs to be, vigilant in those counties where, that's something that the local league can check with their county clerk to see if they fit into that category, and then make sure that that information is shared, as opposed to trying to do one size fits all, when that can just muddy the water. So Barb, your thoughts on that, since
Well, I don't have any thoughts. I just had a clarification question because, I guess I made some assumptions around. I know that Weld County is one of those counties, especially for Spanish. But so right now they don't mail those ballots out. You have to request a ballot in that language if they provide them, and then go to the VSPC and vote in person. Is that correct?
That's my understanding, yes.
Okay, I have to be honest. I thought they were all mailed out automatically. I don't know how they thought that might happen. I do know that they print the registration in Spanish. I don't know if there's a relationship between that and the ballot, or if that's just how they can register in their own language. So I just wanted to be clear. So I do think we need education from the voter service people on that, where it applies.
And while we're having this discussion, I wanted to see if I could quickly find the counties that are currently subject to this requirement. And you can see my guess of 10, it was low. I didn't count them up exactly, but it's more than 10. And then you can kind of, I put them in the chat here. It's very small. Hopefully everyone can read that, or maybe enlarged on your screen. Yeah, I would say probably, without counting specifically, it looks to me like it's maybe somewhere in the neighborhood of maybe about 15 counties, maybe 20. And Spanish is the language that is required, that meets that threshold that we've been talking about.
It's about 20.
It is 20, yeah.
Rich, you're on.
Yes, thank you. So my question is, has the Colorado Clerk and Recorders Association weighed in on this aspect of the legislation, or on any aspect of the legislation, in terms of support or non-support?
There's definitely been some conversations through, the development process. I don't have information as far as like the specific position that they may take on this, but we don't anticipate. I don't believe that we're anticipating a problem with the expansion.
I understand what you're saying. I'm wondering, have you reached out to them for support for the legislation? And if so, what response did you get?
I personally have not, but there's been others in the coalition that have been reaching out to all the key stakeholder groups that would have had those conversations. But I can't provide firsthand information because I wasn't the person that was doing that outreach. I know there's a lot of interest around that. I do want to kind of move away from that, because there's a couple other pieces of the act that I want to mention, just sort of for overview purposes, and just remind everyone that there will be more league-wide discussions on this legislation. So there's more opportunities to get questions answered and have some discussion around this. So we talked earlier about, the private cause of action. I want to speak a little bit about the specific prohibitions that would be put in place as a result of the passage of the Colorado VRA. things that, political subdivisions would be specifically prohibited from doing. And those really kind of fall into two sort of umbrella areas. The first is that as a protection against discrimination in voting, the Act encourages local elections to be held in connection with statewide elections. I know that's an issue that's very much been of interest to the league. We know that there are much lower turnout, particularly amongst certain segments of the population for off-cycle elections. So while there is not a requirement in the Act that political subdivisions have to align everything, there is a lot of incentive built in based on the idea that they would not want somebody to be able to bring a claim of voter discrimination or suppression, for refusal to potentially change their dates. There's no guarantee that they will do that, but there's definitely encouragement specifically spelled out in the Act here. And then the thought is that there would be some fairly strong incentive just so those political subdivisions could sort of protect themselves against claims of voter suppression and voter discrimination. And then the other piece of it that would be tied to a potential cause of action is that there's a prohibition on political subdivisions that against acting in a manner that would result in a material disparity between a protected class and other electors in regard to voter participation or an impairment of opportunity of a protected class to participate in the political process. So those are kind of, the overarching things that, are protected against in the VRA. And then, it's obviously, kind of a factual situation as to whether or not there's a claim that could be brought on, on that basis. But I wanted to point those out because the private cause of action for individuals and organizations, is an important additional legal tool that would be provided as a result of this Act passing. And then these are the things that we would be looking for, in making such a claim. And then the last piece that I want to touch on, very technical in nature, so I probably will very quickly run out on my ability to explain this. But the data collection piece, the election-related data collection, is something that LDB-VCO has been very, very interested in for several years now. And our interest in it really was tied to the work of the independent redistricting commissions and the availability of data that existed, that currently existed and that existed in 2020 is, largely thought to be insufficient to determine compliance with the federal VRA, which is one of the requirements of the redistricting commissions, and to make informed and accurate assessments as to racially polarized voting and some of the other things that you would be looking at, to determine compliance with, with the redistricting process that's set out in Colorado law. So one of the things that, our membership that's been really closely involved in the redistricting process and sort of the data analysis based on what's currently available, one of the real shortcomings that they have noticed is information that is needed that would help with that analysis is voter information at the precinct level, and ensuring that we are collecting election-related information through all primary elections. Right now, I think it's just odd years where it's collected. So really just kind of looking at an expansion of data. The other piece that we've been very concerned about is that as this data is collected, that it be stored in basically an accessible form, accessible to the public, where members of the public could easily access it and utilize it, and that it's retained. So we've got a history of data to be able to look back on and work with from one redistricting cycle to the next. And the proposed retention period in the Colorado VRA is 12 years. So it would take us beyond the 10-year redistricting cycle. And this information would be stored within a new office or entity within the Department of State. So it would be a data collection and information office that is dedicated to both collecting this information and maintaining it in a publicly accessible form. The other piece that's associated with that is that there's sort of a technical assistance piece that's built into the Colorado VRA. Smaller political subdivisions may have some difficulty in gathering the more granular level of data that we're looking for. And I believe that's tied to their GIS capabilities. Again, I'm very quickly about to run out of my technical ability to explain this, but there is acknowledgement within both the State Demographer's Office, Secretary of State's office, that some counties have got some technical limitations. And so there is an assistant component built in. So the goal would be that we would have comparable, more granular statewide data, even in the counties that currently have some technical challenges around gathering it. So that piece, I have to say, we really are very proud of, because while the league was not alone in wanting to see this provision included in the Colorado VRA, I believe we were the first to bring it up, and we've been a strong advocate for ensuring that it stayed in there and that the provisions were as strong as could possibly be. So we have really good quality data to support the work and the successful implementation of the redistricting commissions going forward in Colorado. So I realize that I have taken up a lot of time. I will stop there. And Karen, I will defer to you on if we want to do some questions, or if you guys need to move on to the next topic.
Let me ask one quick question, because I know the state is facing a deficit. How much is this new entity in the Secretary of State's office? What's the cost of that going to be, and the cost of being able to? I'm not suggesting that this isn't a good thing, but the fact that we are facing a deficit, we're going to have to be looking at other places to be able to find move funds around. Is how much of an impact is that going to have on that portion of this piece of legislation?
We haven't seen the fiscal note yet. I will say that various members of the coalition have had a number of conversations, not only with the bill sponsors, but also with the Secretary's office about costs associated with implementation. Some of it's going to involve obviously the building of the database to store this information. That's going to require some hiring of technical staff that would be in charge of building that out and actually maintaining that over time. I know there's some ongoing conversations with the State Demographer's Office to kind of iron out some of the technical requirements that could impact cost. So when I mentioned early on that the bill is likely to be scheduled for a committee hearing in mid-February, the reason, even though it was introduced on the first day of session, because it is a high priority, we're not seeing a super quick turnaround on the committee hearing, because there is still some discussion around this that needs to be had to feed into the fiscal note. You're definitely right that there's lots of concern over the budget, and I would say, as a general rule, what everybody's hearing is that most things that have got a fiscal note are not going to go far. So I think this really it comes down to a matter of priority. And I think because this was first out of the gate for the Senate, we do see a pretty high priority assigned to this, and there is a large stakeholder coalition behind it. So they know this is something that is of interest to the community. And I think from a personal standpoint, just kind of thinking about, our league mission and, our values as an organization, while, there's no getting around the fact that the budget is very tight and there's lots of important priorities that are competing for very few dollars. I think an investment in our democracy and in voting rights is one of the key things that we can invest in, because if we don't have that, we can't really address anything else. So, this is definitely something that's, even in a tight budget cycle, I think we would, strongly argue for the importance of getting this funded appropriately. I say all of this without LAC having had the opportunity to talk about this bill. We have not yet assigned a formal position to it yet, but again, we are in, one of those, I won't say it's unique, but it doesn't happen certainly with every bill that we assign a stance to. But because we've been involved from the very beginning and in the development stage of this, we very much are of the belief that even in the end, if this doesn't turn out to be an absolutely perfect bill, it very much provides some needed protections, and intends to protect against dilution of the Federal Act, and really is a step in the right direction in getting us to further down the road of where we want to be. So
I was just curious that was going to be a sticking point. I don't disagree the need for it. I'm just
yeah, no, it's a concern, and it's been a concern throughout with the stakeholder discussions and with the department officials and the sponsors and all that. It's just a tricky issue.
Did you have a question or a comment?
Yeah, I had a question. It seems to me when I was reading through this previously in different draft forms, there was something that was discussing resolution to redistricting problems should they arise at some point in time. And I guess my basic question is, and I've been sitting in on the alternative voting methods task force, are some proposed, are alternative voting methods included in this as alternatives to redistricting, confronting redistricting problems? And if so, how, I guess?
It's really kind of tied to the remedies that that a plaintiff might seek through a cause of action. So if as an organization, or if there's individuals out there that feel like their voting rights have been compromised, and based on the eligibility requirements, they've got standing to pursue the claim. In determining what remedies they think need to happen to basically rectify either the suppression or the discrimination or whatever they allege is happening, alternative voting methods are one option that can be brought forward as a possible remedy. So thank you for bringing that up, Barb. That's definitely something that I should.
Yeah, I want some clarification, and it would be a remedy through the court action. It wouldn't be something like, okay, now the citizens of that community would have to pass a charter change or something like that.
No, it would be a court imposed remedy.
Imposed one, okay.
That can be suggested by the plaintiff. So that's another really
sure. Oh, good. Well, I'm happy to hear that, because I'm always looking for plan B.
Yeah, definitely.
But I just wanted to know if that was still in there and how it was related. So thank you. And maybe, I know that we're down to like the end of the road here, and I was supposed to be next, but some of my issues, I was going to bring up the two acts that are at the federal level that haven't really been passed yet. What?
Before you start,
what?
I'm wondering, because I don't want to give you short shrift. I think that what you have to talk about is important. Would you be willing to defer until the February meeting so that you?
Well, that's true, but part of what I wasn't going to follow up with the whole thing, but I do have some concerns that some of the provisions that are in these federal bills, is this Voting Rights Act going to help us protect us from some of the things, and maybe this is we can invite Andrea back. But one of the things is like prohibit drop boxes and just some of the mechanics around, and maybe that isn't in this Voting Rights Act, maybe that's someplace else in some other constitutional things we have. But I guess generally what I'd like to talk about is if the federal government does eventually pass some of these things, what kind of protections does Colorado have? Is it embedded in this act, or is it embedded someplace else, or do we need to be thinking about it? And that's all I have. I don't want to tackle that today, but those were my questions.
States' rights supersede.
Right. And if they're just going to deal, and this is about federal elections, they're not talking about state elections, but they're talking about federal elections. So how do those intertwine? What are we doing to prepare ourselves for those should they pass eventually?
Thank you for that. I put a little bit of an update about paid postage in the chat. It's interesting that Steve. Did you have something more you wanted to say, ma'am?
No, I'm finished. Thanks.
Thank you. So I put a little bit of an update, the chat about the Colorado Springs, El Paso County Clerk and Recorder wanting to put a flyer in the ballot delivery envelope saying that you don't have to affix postage, that there's actually a lie on the ballot delivery envelope, saying that you must affix adequate postage. Adequate postage is actually no postage. And so he's asking for an opinion from the Secretary of State's office. And there's some possibility of perhaps changing some language and legislation at some point in time, allowing him to do this if the opinion is that he is not at liberty to put a flyer in the ballot delivery materials saying that you don't actually have to affix postage.
All right. Are there efforts to? So the focus has been on Colorado Springs, not other counties.
No, he is willing to do this for El Paso County, which is by population the largest county in Colorado. And he is very much in favor of paid postage in general. This is a little way to get a little wrinkle to tell people that, hey, you don't actually have to affix postage.
And that he would make a distinction between the U.S. Postal Service and the drop box, I assume.
Well, you never have to affix postage to put something in a ballot drop box.
Right.
But the U.S. Postal Service always delivers the ballot, and it always gets counted as long as it's delivered in a timely fashion without postage. Then what happens is
confusing some people.
Why? How?
I'm sorry?
I don't know how you think that's confusing. I don't understand.
I think for a lot of people, you have to be very clear and detailed. And
correct. The flyer would do that.
The flyer would do that. Okay.
Yeah, the flyer in the ballot delivery materials would just say, hey, you don't really have to affix postage. It would quote the law and the regulations. That's Steve Schleichert's idea as to how to go forward with how he wants to stop the disenfranchisement of those who are disabled and those who are of limited means for voting.
And so that's a standalone decision he's making for his county. Is he talking with the county clerks around the state?
He's at the county clerks association meeting probably now. And he is requesting a legal opinion from the Secretary of State's office. And the language in the clerk and recorder's instructions is unclear as to, in my opinion, as to whether or not they must tell voters that they have to affix postage. The language is obscure and unclear, and so there's some wrinkles there. Interesting.
Thanks for sharing that update, Rich. That's I know we've talked about that in the past, but it's nice to hear some of the latest information on that. So I'm assuming that you will continue to keep us in the loop as you hear more.
One more sentence about it, and that's that the way paid postage passed in I think 2 or 3 other states, was that individual counties passed it for their counties first, and it spurred the state legislature into action.
It's a kind of a grassroots sort of thing that's allowed it to manifest in some of these states at a statewide level.
Correct.
Well, thanks.
You're welcome.
Neil, I want to give you a few quick minutes to be in, and I'm assuming, Barb, you're okay with me putting you on. Okay, thank you. I appreciate that. Neil.
Hi, and thanks. And yeah, people think elections are over in November, and yeah, we have lots of things to do all through the year. And thanks, Andrea. So in November, I talked briefly about issues with the cybersecurity incident, the BIOS passwords being posted. And that would have been the perfect time to double down on risk limiting audits. And instead, we actually saw less transparency and less verifiability for our risk limiting audits than even the previous primary, where they had made some progress based on what I presented a year ago to them and to you. So I just think it's time for the league leadership to reach out to the Secretary of State and try to take this, this is a great opportunity now that people aren't fully heads down in elections, and reach out and try to get some attention to those issues.
Andrea, is this something that we should pass, maybe run past the LAC, or is this something that the election task force would, perhaps, if you're willing, Neil, to kind of take the leadership on this, because you're certainly very, very knowledgeable about this, to maybe draft some kind of communication to send to the Secretary of State's office and share concerns?
I don't think, I'm sure there are things that are relevant to LAC and the legislature that we can do, but this is just following existing law and practices and best practices as we've really been pioneering for a while. So I think it's a Secretary of State issue. And yeah, we can definitely, I can get together with anyone who wants to in the elections. What's the name of it again? The Election Security Subgroup? What did you call it?
The Elections Task Force.
Elections Task Force. So this group. Yeah, I would love to continue to pursue this. I'm hoping that we don't have to wait for another meeting. But what are people's thoughts?
Well, let me throw this out. If you are interested, and I'll go ahead and put I'm sure all of you have my email address, but just on the off chance that for some reason you can't easily find it, I'm going to put my email address in the chat again. And if you are interested, I'm going to let Neil kind of be the one that takes the lead on this. But if you're interested, email me, and what I will do is send something out so we can get a meeting set up. We don't want to wait until next February, to the February meeting to do that. I agree with you, Neil. It's time is of the essence, and I think it's better to reach out sooner than later. I would suggest that, and Andrea, correct me if you think I'm wrong, or if any of the rest of you do, as a courtesy, I think we should, make sure that the state office knows that, once we've come up with some language, this is what we'd like to send, this is why we're concerned and why we want to share this with the Secretary of State's office. We feel that it's important to address some of these concerns and bring these to the forefront, rather than waiting until just before another election when everybody's hair's on fire trying to get ready for it. So does that sound like a plan that works for you all? Okay, well.
That sounds right. Thank you.
There's my email. So it's in your corner, guys. So
right.
I very quickly want to, anything else you want to talk about, Neil?
That's great.
Okay. I just, and not for conversation today, just to give you a heads up, I know that Jeff, and I think he's already probably stepped off, but Christina's still here. I recently found we have a special hospital district in my community that has decided that they don't want to hold an election to fill 5 vacancies on their board. And the reason that they don't want to, they're hoping that they just get the right number of people to apply, because it's going to cost them $60,000 to put on a special election this spring. I understand that as a taxpayer. I don't particularly want, when our hospital, especially when I see that this particular hospital district is kind of serves as the landlord for our local hospital. And as with every other facility, brick and mortar facility, there are repairs that need to be done. And if you know anything about healthcare or anything associated with healthcare, if it costs X for private business to do it, it's exponentially more for anything involving healthcare. So I get that. I also am very concerned that we have set it up so that now these special districts have to have elections in the spring, when it's going to cost them more, because very often they are a standalone group. I don't know what the wisdom of whoever it was that made that suggestion was, what their thought process was, but I think that might be a conversation we might want to have. Is it possible to change these elections back to the fall, when it would be less costly for them to be operated, or to be able to put on some brakes so that instead of costing $60,000, they cost 10, which is still money I'm sure they'd like to use for other things, but it's certainly more reasonable. My concern, I think it's a catch-22. My concern is that democracy isn't being exercised when you're not really encouraging people to run because you don't want to have an election. But on the other hand, I just think it's outrageous that it should cost this much money. So anyway, I'm throwing that out. That might be something for us to think about for a future meeting. I know Christina is very interested in special districts, and she and Jeff are quite knowledgeable about that. So y'all might have some suggestions too.
This
Neil?
is also Bear's area of expertise.
Yes.
I don't want to leave her out of this.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is fair. So you'll all be thinking about what kind of approach you think we ought to make, and maybe this is something that the league needs to take some leadership on and approaching to see, how can we adjust these scheduled elections to make them more economically reasonable to hold. So, Neil?
Yeah, I mean, I would just say that you can have it either way. You can either actually have representative democracy for special districts. And by the way, that's not simple and it costs money. Or you can do what I think Oregon and really, I don't know, most states do, which is not have this astonishing practice of using special districts to do infrastructure for housing development. That is crazy. You should have counties and cities do that. And the way that it has developed since that practice was adopted here in Colorado causes both the abuses in trying to skimp on democracy for taxpayer money and on growth and sprawl that are bad for the environment and everything else. So, maybe the league needs to have a position that says we should stop creating special districts, let them die off as they.
We do. We have one that says we discourage special districts.
And maybe there's a more specific fix, but keep talking. Thank you.
Well, anyway, you're right though. And my preaching right now is, and I don't quite say it right. All these people argue they want small government, meaning they want all these little bitty small governments. That requires citizenship participation. If you have all of these units, and then they say they don't have enough time to do it. We cannot, if you are not willing to put yourself forward as being involved in this as a citizen in your government, then we need to go to a more managed style of city man, where there's city manager or a county manager over these things. And again, goes back to the city and county to install the piping, the roads, et cetera, on these special districts. Instead of allowing the developer to run wild.
Yep.
And well, I'm just going to throw this out there. I don't think this law was ever intended for developer use. And it was something that an attorney spotted as a weak point in the law. And it started with Mission Viejo in Highlands Ranch. And that was the insert. And the problem is they have become massive profit centers for not only developers, but for all the cottage industry surrounding them. And what I'm seeing is that they're becoming perpetual, especially with Senate Bill 262 that was passed last year to allow, not only can the developers determine the taxes because they control the boards initially and can set the mill levies, but now they can buy the debt themselves and get all the tax benefits in it. And I mean, talk about a conflict of interest. I was just stunned that our legislature passed that. So it is a huge problem. And I mean, Christina can tell you, we have done research on the profits that these developers are making, and it is enormous, frankly, well above what is normal.
Okay, well, you all send me, Christina, Fair, talk to Jeff. We pretty much set for what we're going to do for February, but if you've got information that you want to be on the March agenda, then I always like to be far in advance. That makes my life easier. So is there any other comments about this?
Well, I'll just make one comment about elections and special districts. They are all arbitrarily held. Everybody does it differently. There is no consistency. You don't know who's counting the votes. And oftentimes the people counting the votes have a direct conflict of interest.
Well, the election I'm talking about is handled by a local lawyer.
That's right. Yes. And it works for the
again, these are taxpayer dollars that this board oversees. And
how much money does the lawyer get paid?
Well, this particular lawyer is getting $30,000 for an election.
Well, I'll give you an idea on that, Barb, because I was testifying in committee, and I asked. No, it was for the task force. It was for the task force that went on, because the governor inserted his foot into the task force and changed the whole requirements for who was going to be on it. So anyway, it ended up being dominated by the industry and not by taxpayers, when the two individuals who wrote the bill wanted it to be for taxpayers. Okay, well, I wrote in and said, I find it, insulting to the person heading the head of DORA, that they are allowing these people to be on this committee when they have a direct financial conflict of interest, and they are making bundles of money on this. And the reply was, well, I've checked with them and they say they're not making much money. Well, okay, I went into one county, okay, for two of the attorneys that were on this committee. I went through every single metro district that they represent, and they each were making over $1 million a year just on that, not on writing the metro district laws or setting them up. This is just their yearly fees, okay? And that was one county. So for them to say that was such a lie and so disingenuous. I mean, the taxpayers of Colorado are getting so ripped off, and now there's starting to be problems in the bonds. I don't know if you've heard any of this, but there's now problems with some districts having to dip into their savings. What's that called? Their
reserves.
Their reserves to pay for their
Their elections,
well, no, to pay for their bond.
their
To what they
bond.
owe on the bond. And this new law that was passed in 262, which was sponsored by some Democrats, and to allow them to own the bonds, okay, for which they are imposing taxes, it is going to cause these bonds, you were saying, Neil, wanting to just put an end to them and let them run out. They're never going to run out because they keep refinancing and they keep.
Oh no.
Yes, it's unbelievable what's going on.
Barb, one of the places you could help right now for Weld County is
Yeah.
delegate somebody to track the elections and see which special districts end up canceling their election and when they post. They should
Okay.
have a posting somewhere after the 28th of February, whether they're going to have an election or not. Last time around, some of the management companies said, oh, we don't have to inform the DOLA website that we're canceling our election until election day. That is incorrect. They have 8 days. Fair? I can't remember exactly.
Oh, I don't remember. I'm not
Yeah,
on
but
that
anyway, it's within a
technicality.
very short period of time. They must notify DOLA of the
Yeah.
election cancellation.
Canceled.
And we'd like to know how many are going to have elections this spring, which is May 6th.
Oh, it's May 6th. Well, I have to
Mhm.
tell you, there's some little person in the back of the Weld County someplace office who called me to ask me about special elections. And that was last fall. So I wrote her name down and I told her I'd call her back because she says, I don't know anything about what I'm doing. Do you know? So I will call you back. So I will follow up. I don't know if I wrote that down. I'll see if I can at least start there. And if she
Okay.
can tell me, and I know because she's going, I don't know what I'm supposed to be doing.
She
So
works for the county?
yes.
Oh, well, the county doesn't do anything about them.
Yeah, that's what
They
I got.
don't
I don't
hold them.
know. It was just from out of the woodwork, and I'm going. She seemed like a nice young lady, and like say, usually a new part-time person or something they hired, and said, "There, go in the corner and take care of this." So she says, "Well, I thought maybe you would know," and I said, "Well, we have had some conversations about it, and we're doing a lot of work in that area, so I'll get back to you in the spring." So here I go. I'll call her and see what's up, and then I'll get back to you.
Well, in Jeffco, the county clerk is nice enough to try and accumulate the data of who's canceling their elections. I think there's a requirement they notify both the county clerk and DOLA, but don't hold me to
Okay.
that. I need to really
Okay.
reread all of the election laws.
Well, I'm going to see. So I just need to find out what special districts are having elections.
Mhm.
And
It
if
should be all of them.
Should be
Everyone
all
should
of
be
them
here.
because they're staggered. They have staggered terms.
well,
All
I'm going to
special
go
dis- yeah,
check this
25
out.
and 27. And looking at some of Jeffco ones last week, they're putting off empty slots that they should have to have an election for, saying, oh no, we don't have to fill that slot till 2027. Oh no, if they have a vacancy.
Oh, you
they're
mean
supposed-
the boards in those districts?
Yeah, the board itself has, let's say should be 5 members.
Right.
They have vacancies in 2 slots and they're not due until 2027. But the law says, if I understand what Ferris told me correctly, if you have a vacancy, you have to have an election.
Okay.
Well,
Yeah,
you don't
so-
have to have an election. You have to fill it.
You
You have to fill it
the
some way,
You have to
vacancy.
fill
somehow.
it. And you
And
have to
instead
look
there's-
for people to fill it. And if you don't get anybody to fill it, well, then nothing is done. But the problem is you've got a bunch of people who are novices at doing this stuff. They don't understand Metro District law. I have been into it here with my board, and the company that runs it has given them very bad information. I put them on the spot and got them all upset in a 24-hour period because they decided I was one of the volunteers that was willing to take on one of these spots. And as a matter of fact, another lady was too. They had 2 of us they could have chosen from, and the president of the board decided, well, neither of you, we have 3 kinds of homes in our neighborhood. We have patio homes, townhomes, and condos. And he says, well, you guys are from the patio homes, and we don't need any more people from the patio homes. So therefore, we're not going to fill the spot. And I just went, oh, okay, I'll fix you on this one. And I sent them a letter the day before they were supposed to, I waited. I didn't want them to have any time, and wrote them and said, and I quoted the law and I gave them a reference. Oh, and in this conversation, the community management person, I referred to her. I said, she can tell you that you can't do this. And she said, oh no, it's okay for them to do this. I was just so, in my opinion, they need to be fired, but because they don't
Make
know
up
what
the
they're
laws as
doing.
we go along.
Yeah, and so I wrote them a letter and said, okay, and if you have not filled this by tomorrow, which is your deadline, the next step is to contact the county commissioners and report them. So I threatened to do that. So they jumped through hoops to get that filled, and of course they didn't fill it with me, which I was glad that, I had been in contact with the other gal and I told her I was going to do this. And I said, I don't think you should put your name on the letter. Let's just have me do it.
Okay,
So
so I
anyway,
gotta go.
there's
I
a
gotta
lot
go.
of shenanigans that are going on,
Oh
some
my God.
intentionally, some unintentionally, but it is a mess. And trying to get past the lobby, the lobbyists, they have a very strong lobby. And I have been working for years with Coloradans for Metro District Reform, testifying and everything else, and we get nowhere. We have been successful in a couple of areas, but not enough to get any changes made. And what they'll all say is, well, I really don't understand. And most of them say, and we have offered training for them, everything to learn about metro districts, but they get elected and they don't even know what they are. I mean, I know realtors that don't know what metro districts are.
Oh God. Well, anyway, I gotta go.
Okay, sorry.
But thank you. But I love it.
On this
I'll
subject a lot.
call this gal and I'll chat her up and see what's going on.
I'm gonna let you take the lead, and fair to get something to me for a March meeting. If your local league has not scheduled a presentation by Jeff Oster on the First Amendment, please contact your leadership. And find out when it is. I'm pretty sure he's gotten everybody in the state scheduled. He came last weekend for us in Montezuma County, and it was wonderful. So,
was it really good?
It's very good. It's very good.
Okay.
Karen, we ran a preliminary meeting yesterday for Jeff. We kind of talked about some of the books he recommended. Well, we didn't really, because we ended up putting together a slideshow to try to get people some awareness on it. Jeff is coming to Jeffco on the 4th.
Okay, good. I'm glad. Like I said, I'm pretty sure he's scheduled with all of the leagues now. There were 2 that were still left, and I think we've gotten them squared away. So if for some reason you can't attend, we're going to try to get a Zoom for the middle to the end of February so that everybody has a chance to hear him.
To see it. Okay.
Yeah. So it's well worth your time.
And Karen, I don't want to hold up Neil, but I know Christina told me you've got an issue with your hospital board or this hospital district. Yeah. And what is it that's going on?
They don't want to have an election.
They don't want to have an election because it's too expensive, right?
And I understand that. I mean, that's to do a repair in our hospital, but at the same time, it's kind of a catch-22. We don't have an election because we want to save the money, but then the democratic process is not, anyway,
and then who is it, that backs out and doesn't? In many cases, it's the moneyed people that won't back out, and the people that might represent the views of the public are eliminated. So that becomes problematic too. Who is it that's not going to run?
This is a public board. I mean,
yeah.
It's not a special district in the sense that it's a developer. This is a board that represents taxpayer dollars that we levied on ourselves.
Yeah.
And I understand what they're saying. I just think that it's sad that we set ourselves up to be in a situation where elections cost so much.
Yes. You know what? I'll try to contact Amanda Gonzalez, who's do I have her name right?
Yes.
Who is our county clerk, or else Christina. I'll do it, Christina, but I know you're swamped usually. But just to talk to her, because nobody consulted the county clerks when they made that change. I don't know if you know that. But when they changed, the county clerk said, we can't do it then.
Neil,
So,
we have not taken our
so
dog
I
and
do
pony
think
show
we
on
should
special.
make a pitch for having the league push for a change back. At least put it on the same calendar as it is it the mayor's and mayoral things like that. That's in the
According to my county clerk, it would be much less expensive to do it in the fall. There would be much greater.
right.
We have very,
Right.
you know, and another argument is that here, you know, we may have a couple hundred people turn out, and so we've spent $60,000 for 200 people to vote. And
Mhm.
so anyway, but you guys talk and come up with a plan and
Yeah.
on the marches.
Neil, we haven't taken our dog and pony show to Boulder County yet, LWV Boulder County. I mean, sometime we wouldn't mind doing that. So if you want to mention it to the board, the planning board there.
Interesting. Yeah. It's yeah, makes sense to me. I don't really know. I don't follow all the local meetings very well, but good idea. Thank you.
Oh, I'd love to take it to Pikes Peak and Boulder County and Adams County at some point, because those are the ones there's huge growth in it right now.
Oh yeah,
Right.
Adams and Weld are two of the worst. Oh.
Yeah, we've done Weld once. We can always go back to
And there
anybody.
were not enough people there to even they had 6 show up or something.
We had a little better than that, but not much.
Yeah.
Anyway, yeah.
I have another meeting I have to go to.
Okay.
Okay. Me
Bye.
too. Talk to you later.
Thanks,
Take care.
Bye.
Holiday, and I expect to hear from all of you.
Mhm.
Thanks.